Tonight on CBC Vancouver News. More people are asking for more help.
I foresee us getting to a breaking point.
The major jump in people relying on food banks in BC and the calls for major change. Plus, economic opportunity or environmental problem?
I can see that my home is right there in this gas pattern.
A proposed biofuel plant on semi-amu land in White Rock has supporters and opponents. Also, spooky save.
Just grab the skeleton with your hand.
A moose gets a Halloween helping hand in Fort St. John.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. We're getting a better sense of just how stretched and desperate some people in BC are. A report on hunger finds a lot more of them are relying on food banks in our province. And as John Hernandez reports, the authors say lifting people out of poverty is the only way to curb this alarming trend.
It's all hands on deck at the Greater Vancouver Food Bank.
I think that we are saving lives in the interim while our social safety net has almost fully collapsed.
This is one of the busiest food bank warehouses in the province, and demand just keeps getting higher.
This is no longer a service provided for people in between jobs or who are on some kind of assistance. We have almost 30% of people using food banks at our food bank. They're working.
A new hunger count report from Food Banks Canada found there were nearly 200,000 visits to food banks in BC in March alone. That's a 20% increase compared to the same time last year and more than 50% compared to 2019. Researchers point to the cascading effects of the pandemic, climate disasters, and the cost of living crisis.
This year we saw in the report that the highest reason for people coming to food banks that was given was the cost of food. And that's the first time that it's been higher than inadequate wages or lack of hours.
I foresee us getting to a breaking point.
Here in Richmond, demand has far surpassed the provincial average.
Our numbers are worse. We have seen a 56% increase since since just last year.
Given its proximity to the airport, operators say this food bank supports many newcomers to Canada, but donations have lagged behind demand the past 2 years.
People are being very, very conservative in their donations, and that's one of the reasons why we have to start purchasing more and dig deeper into our reserve funds.
The Hunger Report authors say this crisis can only be curbed by building more affordable housing and offering more financial supports for low-income earners. The BC government says it's trying.
We've been working to increase people's income so that the cost of living is easier to contend with, but the impact of global inflation has been a really hard hit.
The province says it's also offering more funding to food banks. Welcome news, but
it is a Band-Aid on our Band-Aid.
For a wound that shows no signs of healing. John Hernandez, CBC News, Richmond.
Now, for many people, rising interest rates have been a major pain for their budgets and lives. Today, the Bank of Canada says, though, it's leaving interest rates unchanged for the second time in a row. They will stay at 5%. But as senior business reporter Nisha Patel tells us, that is still the highest level in Canada in 22 years.
High interest rates are leaving a bad taste at this bakery.
We were supposed to open a few shops next year, and we have to reconsider everything.
They're pausing expansion because bank loans are too costly.
And you'll be there till 7.
Many Canadian homeowners are also on edge.
I kept seeing it thinking, no, the rates are going to come down. The rates are going to come down.
But when it came time for this family to renew their mortgage, their monthly bill had ballooned.
It was ultimately a shock to kind of go through and say, okay, our payments are going to be changing by $1,200. What type of things are we going to have to give up?
Thank you and good morning.
The Bank of Canada has raised interest rates 10 times over the past year and a half as it tries to rein in rampant inflation and slow the economy.
People are booking fewer trips. We're also seeing people dining out at restaurants less often and less frequently. And that's just a sign that these higher interest rates are starting to eat up household purchasing power.
Still, the central bank predicts it will take another 2 years for inflation to come back to the 2% target.
So it's not.
But it says its higher interest rates are working, so it opted to pause while leaving the door open for future hikes.
If we see inflationary pressures persist, we are prepared to raise our interest rate further.
The central bank also said higher oil prices and global conflict added uncertainty to its outlook and predicted Canada's economy will grow more slowly than expected next year. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
Now, some in the real estate sector predict we could start to see variable mortgage rates flatten. That's welcome relief for some mortgage holders.
If you took out a mortgage in 2021 at a very low rate, you're looking at still, by 2025, probably a 30 to 40% increase in your payments.
Some experts do say mortgage rates will start to come down in the back half of 2024, and that could provide a boost to home sales, but it's still expected to be a below normal year for sales. A proposed biofuel project that could be built on Semiahmoo land in White Rock is raising economic hopes and environmental worries. Michelle Gassoub has more on the proposal and concerns from some neighbors.
This expanse of Semiahmoo land could soon be home to a new biofuel plant. It would convert organic waste into natural gas, and the nation says it would provide unprecedented economic opportunities. But not everyone who lives near the site is welcoming the proposal.
I can see that my home is right there in this gas pattern, and that's my son's school.
Smith is one of many residents who have been poring over the data provided by Andean Global, the company behind the project. They're concerned about just how close the facility would be to their homes and the smells and gases that could be emitted.
We're talking about things like sulfur dioxide. We're talking about nitrogen oxides. Nitrogen oxides are the smog pattern that you see over a city.
The residents are also worried about the proximity to local watersheds, a key habitat for Pacific salmon. Except for the billboards that you can see behind me, the Semiahmoo land back here is pretty much untouched and pristine. Before construction on the project could begin, they'll have to obtain an environmental assessment and an air quality license. If it gets those, the project could be done by as early as 2026. Andean Global didn't respond to a CBC News request for an interview. An 159-page assessment provided detailed maps of how the community could be impacted by odors and gases. It says the majority of odor exceedances occur during fall and winter, when people are much less likely to be outside. It also says the odors are more likely to occur at night. But the calls for concern are also coming from Surrey.
This is a beautiful piece of property, prime waterfront property, very close to residential areas, and I think the residents quite frankly feel that this sort of facility belongs in an industrial area, not close to residential.
The Semiahmoo First Nation and Andean Global maintain the project will keep tons of waste out of the landfill with minimal impact to those who live nearby. Residents are calling for the project to be put on pause, at least for now. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, White Rock.
Leaders of the Semiahmoo Nation tell CBC News they were meeting about the project today and did expect to address concerns at some point. If you haven't already stocked up on Halloween candy, consider this your warning. As with most things, prices are up. Our Bill Puri shows us how much they've risen and why some will not let it stop their Halloween fun.
Ghouls and goblins paved the way to a chamber of treats.
This is my candy stash. I am very pleased to show everybody. We've got 1,350 large-size bars. It's $1,000 in candy.
The cost of Halloween this year is turning heads.
The prices have gone crazy. They really, really, truly have.
So how much more can you expect to spend on candy this year? Consider this popular pack of treats. Last year, a 50-count box sold for between $6.49 and $7.99. This year, on sale, prices have hit $9.99. That's higher than inflation.
I think like anything with inflation, it never goes up consistently. The only thing I would say, it really depends on the day you're shopping.
As for why prices are up, Loblaw says the reason is because sugar and cocoa prices are at all-time highs. Metro in Ontario and Quebec refuse to comment. The price of a box of candy may scare you, but apparently not enough to spook us out of actually buying it. Retail analysts estimate the average household spends $25 to $40 annually on Halloween candy.
I think there are parts of Halloween that are recession-proof, and those are going to be for the little kids, the trick-or-treating. I don't think they're going to break the bank.
In anticipation of a banner year, some retailers have more inventory than last year.
It looks like it's going to be the biggest year we've had in the last 5 years.
Despite the sticker shock, shoppers don't seem to be dissuaded.
We just decide to bite the bullet and spend a little bit more.
Statistics Canada estimates 4.2 million Canadian children are in the prime trick-or-treating age of 5 to 14. They know exactly what they want.
Like a whole bunch of candy.
And that could be pricey. Belle Puri, CBC News, Vancouver.
People gathered in Camloops to say goodbye to a newspaper. Camloops this week published its last edition today after 35 years in that community. The publisher blames declining ad revenue and rising costs for the shutdown, among other things. Dozens will be out of work. This is the first time since 1884 that Camloops has been without a physical newspaper.
We need this newspaper. We love this newspaper. We've always had, our children featured in there.
We just want to say thank you and farewell for the last 35 years of the wonderful connection that we've had in the community. I mean, all the incredible workers, the stories that we wouldn't have known about if it wasn't for Camloops this week.
Some Camloops This Week employees hope to relaunch the paper under a new business model, saying their community needs local reporting. A big change of heart for some of Port Coquitlam's youngest residents. 2 weeks after rejecting a daycare on a residential street, Port Coquitlam City Council has now voted to approve the new childcare facility with spots for 65 children. Justin McElroy has more on the reversal and the ripple effects.
Hey, remember this moment in Port Coquitlam politics?
I don't believe property values are going to drop. I don't believe the bears are going to eat the children.
That was 2 weeks ago at a public hearing when 9 residents spoke against a proposed daycare on a residential road. And yes, property values and bears were 2 of the things residents cited. But yesterday, council changed their mind.
There were, I think, comments that have no basis in reality or any factual underpinning to them.
That is Port Coquitlam Mayor Brad West. Using the powers under the community charter given to mayors, he was able to ask for a redo. And after West stepped in, councillors suddenly had a change of heart.
So when that many people come together, I'm going to listen to them. After that evening, I went back and I reconsidered everything again. Daycare, there's a dire shortage of spaces, and we need to find more spaces.
When you see this many people come out and they're this passionate and their concerns are so loud, it's hard to just blow past them. I think that taking the time to process is the key takeaway here. And sometimes you just need a little bit more information and a little bit more time to process.
So what can we learn from all this? First, as Wes said, public hearings can only reveal so much.
Not everybody feels comfortable coming up and speaking at a public hearing, and not everyone can attend a public hearing. So public hearings should not be intended in any way, shape, or form to be representative of broad public opinion.
2, when you say no to more childcare, people become upset, and for good reason. Here is a chart. It shows the percentage of childcare facilities in big cities that are completely full at the moment. And virtually everywhere in BC, that number is more than half. We don't plan cities so that half the schools can't take students in, but right now that's the reality for childcare. And 3, this showcases the complex way licensed childcare facilities are set up in this province. The province funds spaces, health authorities license them, but cities have to approve them being allowed. Now, most cities want a lot of oversight and the power to ask for changes if they give the green light. But that might be changing.
Our operators are experts in looking after kids. They're not experts in going through development rezoning processes.
That is Delta Councillor Dylan Kruger. On Monday, Delta Council voted to make childcare facilities legal in all areas of the city without needing further approval. In an odd way, his argument is that cities have to care less about childcare, at least when it comes to giving the green light or not. Justin McElroy, CBC News, Vancouver.
BC's Lieutenant Governor was presented with the province's first poppy of 2023 in Victoria today. This ceremony takes place every year in the weeks leading up to Remembrance Day.
It's very important, I think, for us to remember the people who have served our country so loyally in the past, the many who have made what is often called the ultimate sacrifice, who have given their lives to protect the Canadian way of life and to ensure that we can live in a country which is characterized by peace and security.
You will be able to buy poppies at various Canadian businesses starting this Friday through to November 11th. The funds raised in the campaign support veterans, their families, and other dependents, as well as seniors, and pay for Remembrance Day education programs. Only in Canada. Earlier this week, a moose in Fort St. John got tangled up in a bit of a spooky situation, but one brave person stepped up to help, despite the mildly terrifying task. Have a look.
Just grab the skeleton with your hand.
I was going over to a buddy's house, me and my wife, and I see my buddy Brock there standing with a piece of tubing in the neighbor's yard. And I seen Halloween decorations dangling off what I thought was a tree, and he was poking the Halloween decorations, what was actually the moose's head.
You guys need a hook.
I was in the house, and with the wife, I looked out the window and I could see people using a piece of stainless tubing to get the decorations off the horn of this moose. I went up, videoed it for a while. I walked over to the fence, and as soon as it seen me walk over to the fence, it started walking over to me. And another gentleman walked over.
It's kind of like he knew that I was going to be attempting to help him, and then that's when I grabbed hold of the decorations, and he kind of pulled back and pulled them off his own head.
It was a skull with cobweb type things and just a black stuff that flutters in the wind, and looks kind of cool, but the moose wore it better.
He wasn't a huge moose by any means, but definitely, 10 times my size and my weight. So I was a little bit leery. He kind of lunged back a little bit, but then he came forward. That's when he started licking my hand, which I found kind of strange. And then he lifted his head right up, and that's when I was able to touch the moose. It was a little nerve-wracking. They are a big animal, and I would advise against it, and probably wouldn't do it again myself. But in the moment, it was worth it. Pretty much the most Canadian thing I've done.
But not a big moose. October is not yet over, but Nanaimo last night got its first snowfall of the season. Didn't stick around today, but it still caught some people a bit off guard.
It's shocking, especially with all the Halloween decorations out, and to have snow coming down. It's very surprising.
A little early, but still, it wasn't bad, I guess.
Oh man, it was coming down hard, but we enjoyed it. We were out and out walking around in the lunch hour and at night.
Other parts of Vancouver Island and Metro Vancouver saw power outages and trees toppled because of snow, rain, and high winds. BC Hydro says at one point more than 100,000 customers were in the dark, but as of now, it's restored power to most. Doris Madavi joins us with a first look at the weather. It was windy and rainy last night. Bit of a bump, eh?
Oh, definitely. So there was a wind warning in place for Howe Sound that we looked at, but the fact that it blew all the way across the water and was really affecting many places across the south coast was a little bit unexpected, just how severe that wind was, as well as the snow in Nanaimo was forecasted as being possible, but still surprising to see it this early for sure. I looked back at the Environment Canada records going back well over a century, and from what I can see, no record of any snowfall happening this week in all that time. So very early snowfall there. Across the province, we also saw some snow happening throughout the southern interior. There was some snow happening in the north as well, although again, no radar coverage here, so we can't pick up on it. But temperatures going to stay low, even though that precipitation is mostly over. Maybe a couple more showers happening in the south tomorrow, but not too much at all. Maybe some snow in the east as well, but temperatures again staying very cold tomorrow. And these are the highs, if you can believe it. The lows tomorrow even worse. That was today, those temperatures I showed. This is tonight, though. Temperatures coming down into the negative through most of BC, just a few places like us on the coast being spared those cold temperatures. So be ready for quite a chilly night.
Okay. Thanks very much, Darius.
Thank you.
The BC Sports Hall of Fame has some new members. Athletes, coaches, and a longtime sports journalist joined the storied group today with help from an Olympian turned CBC reporter.
Please join me in congratulating on his selection for induction into the BC Sports Hall of Fame in the athlete category for baseball, Justin Morneau.
Our own Karen Larson co-hosted this year's induction ceremony at BC Place. New Hall of Fame members include New Westminster-born slugger Justin Morneau, longtime sports broadcaster and Sports Page alumnus Don Taylor from North Burnaby, as well as Olympic champion in freestyle skiing Cassie Sharp from Comox.
I'm so pleased. It's kind of cool because it's halfway through my career. It's not at the end, and I think I can just add to some of the accomplishments.
Where are you in your career? So you're still going, right?
Yeah, I'm still planning. I just had a baby 2 months ago, so I'm going to hang out with baby Lou for a little while, and then start training and hopefully qualify for the 2026 Olympics in Milan.
I always wanted to champion sports around BC, Vancouver, and I felt this is where I could do my best. What I knew best.
Also joining the Hall of Fame in the Pioneer category is the 1921-22 Vancouver Amazons women's hockey team. They were the first BC team to win the Alpine Cup at the 1922 Banff Women's Tournament Championship, known back then as the female equivalent of the Stanley Cup. After the break, why a UBC researcher is digging into pika poop and how the mountain-dwelling mammal impacts climate change. Our Darius Madavi will be back with the hot poop after this. Thanks for joining us on our commercial-free live stream tonight. Since New Brunswick's Policy 713 came under review, sex education has been a subject of some debate in the province. We're going to break down what is taught from kindergarten to grade 12.
Sex education. Why is it such a big issue in New Brunswick? Back in May, a policy designed to protect LGBTQ+ students, Policy 713, came under review. Since then, protesters, the education minister, and the premier have made statements targeting not just pronouns in classrooms, but content in education itself.
The minister, he has said he's received hundreds of questions and complaints and what's this all about, and we're getting, from different parents, different schools, what's being taught.
But it's the other stuff that gets added in where that creates the greatest angst with parents.
So what is sex education? What's actually being taught in New Brunswick schools?
We know that most adults want kids to have basic sex education because it's something that keeps them safe. And it's also something it is about safety. It's also about supporting their development, right? We want them to be ready to live in the world that we live in, which is a world full of different people.
Sex-related education happens in every level of education between kindergarten and grade 9, with the bulk of it happening in middle school. In grade 12, the subject is included as an elective. In elementary school, children learn the appropriate names for body parts, about consent, how to communicate the word no, and about different identities.
You also hear about things like puberty and how bodies change and what happens to young people as they develop over time, but also how bodies develop differently.
As children go into middle school, they get into more complex topics like reproduction and boundary setting. Here, students learn about gender roles, identity, and expression. In grade 9, students continue to learn about consent and sexual diversity, healthy sexuality, and what it means to be sexually active. In grade 12, topics include maintaining relationships, distinguishing between love and infatuation, and respecting partners in sexual and romantic relationships.
What feels good in this relationship, what does not feel good. We learn about coercion, learn a little bit about sexual violence.
Sex educator and author Corey Silverberg says that sex is like any other subject, and that school is just the beginning.
What it is it's an opportunity for us as families to have these conversations, right? So it's important that it gets to seed that's planted at school But how it grows and where the conversation goes is entirely so much about what happens at home.
They are fluffy, scruffy, and closely resemble a rodent, though are actually more related to rabbits. The American pika is a mammal that lives in rock fields and mountainous grassland above the tree line here in BC. They're the subject of new research out of UBC Okanagan. More specifically, their poop. Our Darius Madavi joins us now to explain why. So, Darius, clear something up for us. We've heard pika, we've heard pika. What's the correct pronunciation?
Well, it really depends who you ask. If you ask me, pika, which is why I put the pronunciation guide in your prompter to say pika.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. But our producer, Matthew, insists that it is pika. And so I asked the researcher that I spoke with. She says pika. All the people I know in research say pika, but I think many Canadians do say pika. So, you know, it depends who you ask. But I'm going to go with pika for this piece, and let's talk about the pika because they are found through many of BC's mountain ranges in BC and Alberta, as well as through much of the states. This is the American pika's range. They are not listed as endangered, but they are declining, and they are widely recognized among biologists as one of the most severely declining species, one that we need to really be keeping an eye on, not just for the sake of the pikas themselves, which typically, as you said, live in mountainous areas, which means that as the climate continues to warm, they don't really have many places to move. They can continue to move higher in elevation, which is what we've seen is what they're doing. But beyond that, they can't really move to other mountains without descending and climbing up another mountain, not that they'd know to do that. It's a really precarious situation for them as they experience these range shifts that all species are doing currently because of climate change. So they're in a particularly bad spot, but that also means that by keeping an eye on them, we can learn a lot about other species, which is what I learned from Kate Arpin, who is a researcher at UBC Okanagan.
American pikas are known as an indicator species. So by studying population characteristics, you can hope to get an indication of how environmental change might be impacting their ecosystem and therefore the environment that they live in.
So Darius, keeping track of pikas important. How do we do that?
So right now, current methods involve just doing occupancy surveys. So going to the range of the pika, seeing where we can find them, where they're known to live, looking for things like their poop, their scat. But future methods could be a lot more explanatory. They could tell us a lot more about the species as a whole. So by using genotyping, we can actually look at the genes that make up the pikas. We can learn a lot about the individuals and the population as a whole. And part of the reason that this is so powerful is through eDNA, the ability to collect DNA from the environment. Here is what Kate had to say about that.
The genetic monitoring tool was developed to include genetic markers that can look at a wide variety of different population characteristics, ranging from, for instance, differentiating between different individuals and looking at broad-scale patterns of connectivity.
So working with researchers from Parks Canada, like Tony Einfeld, who made those beautiful pictures we saw earlier, and Michael Reslow, her supervisor, they've created a new genomic tool that'll allow us to collect DNA from tissue samples or even the scat in the environment and learn a lot about the species as a whole, not only the individuals, but the population as well.
And what goes into this kind of research?
A lot of work has to be done, collecting the scat samples, learning a lot about how the tool can be implemented. Right now, it works extremely well on specific tissue samples, but when it comes to scat, there is a high return rate, but the error is also quite high, so more work needs to be done. But there's a lot of work in the lab and the field that goes into this. Here's what Kate had to say about her favorite parts.
I love being out in the field. To actually be able to be there and see the study species and see the study area in the area that ultimately you're working towards better understanding and hopefully in the future better, protecting. It's just such a wonderful, almost like humbling experience to be able to be there and see it. And I was very grateful for Parks Canada to allow me to come tag along and actually, see the areas that I'd been studying for the last 2 years.
So this is some incredibly promising research, and as it continues, we're looking forward to seeing more applications of environmental DNA and these sort of genomic tools that have been used for pikas, polar bears, and various other species.
The whole gamut. Darius Madavi, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Recovering from airstrikes as the threat of a ground incursion grows, people in Gaza struggle to care for their wounded as Israel's anti-Hamas efforts continue. More after this.
It looks like it's business as usual, but this fall in Vancouver, it's been anything but business as usual.
I think clothing is down because women don't need to put on heavy sweaters at this time of year.
Generally, people are crying the blues because it's not the weather to buy, fall sweaters, winter coats. They're still wearing their summer clothes.
Excuse me, sir. We've got to stop you and ask you about the way you're dressed on this day.
Yeah.
You haven't even got any socks on.
No, I never wear socks.
Not even in the winter?
Nope.
Just about everyone you talk to tells a similar tale. Most retailers, especially clothing stores, say sales are down 10 to 20%.
The answer for this downturn in retail sales isn't in the plunging stock market. The answer, my friend, quite literally, is blowing in the wind, this warm summer wind.
People who could be shopping are instead doing summer things, like smashing tennis balls.
If I lived in Hawaii or San Diego, I'd never get my Christmas shopping done. You don't want to go indoors in weather like this.
And that's the problem. It's just too darn nice outside. Normally this time of the year, we'd be spending dreary, rain-soaked afternoons and evenings in stores and malls.
You don't want to be inside if it's sunny out, and it's really hard to work with wools when it's not cold. And cottons we haven't brought in because we're expecting winter, and the whole shop is basically filled with winter.
The storefront windows say winter, but the sky says summer. But it depends on what you're selling. Some upscale retailers say they're benefiting from this good weather.
The weather has helped us.
If it wasn't for the weather, you'd be doing worse?
I think so.
So while some businesses are finding a silver lining in the clouds, they're either able to continue selling summer clothes or at least delay purchasing winter clothes. There are other businesses who are entirely dependent upon the weather. Other businesses who look for clouds, any kind of clouds. Hello, anybody here? You can't go wrong in Vancouver, or can you? Because it's been such an incredible summer and fall.
I don't know. My grandfather was told in 1935 to come out here from Toronto because it rains in Vancouver. And he did that, and he was right. But now I'm starting to think I should pack up and go the other way because it's raining in Toronto.
With sales this bad, you may be wondering why they're still making umbrellas here. Well, the Flater family has been in the umbrella business for more than 50 years, and they're reasonably certain it's going to rain again. Ted Chernecki, CBC News, Vancouver.
Israel's prime minister repeated today that his country is preparing for a ground invasion of Gaza, but didn't say when that might happen. As the CBC's Margaret Evans reports, it comes amid continued airstrikes into Gaza and pressure for more humanitarian aid.
A rescue in the dark. The tools used to pull someone out of a concrete tomb, rudimentary. The emergency worker is naming this man's family. Amula, he says, your wife. We got her out. And Hala is out, I swear. It's the aftermath of an Israeli airstrike that hit a complex of residential buildings in Han Yunis in the early hours of the morning. The Israeli army says it's targeting Hamas operatives, not civilians. The south is supposed to be the safe side of Gaza. Hundreds of thousands have left the north, heeding Israeli warnings. Now, the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has issued another in a television address, saying a ground incursion is being prepared. I call on all the innocent residents of Gaza to evacuate the south of the Strip, he's saying. And he encouraged Israelis to arm themselves with personal weapons. Conditions in southern Gaza are already miserable, the air clogged with the smoke of airstrikes as people struggle for food and water. Aid agencies warn that the lack of fuel could soon shut down lives. UNRWA, the UN agency looking after Palestinian refugees in Gaza, says the absence of fuel might close down its operations. Israel says Hamas has plenty of stockpiled fuel that it could offer. And Israeli officials are in no mood to do the UN any favors in the wake of what they say are unacceptable comments by the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who told the UN Security Council the Hamas attacks didn't happen in a vacuum, leading to Israeli calls for his resignation.
Unless he apologizes immediately.
Guterres says his words have been misinterpreted.
Indeed, I spoke of the grievances of the Palestinian people. And in doing so, I also clearly stated, and I quote, "But the grievances of the Palestinian people cannot justify the appalling attacks by Hamas."
Relations between Israel and the UN have never been the easiest, but this very public falling out could have serious implications for the current crisis, Israel threatening to refuse UN officials visas. Margaret Evans, CBC News, Jerusalem.
In just 12 hours, it grew from a tropical storm to a monster Category 5 hurricane. Why did Otis grow so quickly, and the impact on Mexico after this?
I'm Jeff Queen, and I just finished what my wife and I call the Queen Family Cross Canada Marathon Tour. The plan was to eventually run a marathon in every province in Canada. I guess I'd just kind of gotten out of university and was looking for a way to stay active and got into running, and honestly just thought it'd be kind of cool to run a marathon someday, and ran the first one, and I was hooked. So the first marathon I decided to do was the Valley Harvest Marathon in Kentville, Nova Scotia. And I decided to sign up for that, honestly, long before I should have. I was severely undertrained and under-knowledgeable on the distance and the challenges, checking off my second province. So it was the Okanagan Marathon in Kelowna, BC. So that one, again, a little better trained, and that was the first one that I ran the whole way through without stopping, and the first time I went under 4 hours. So New Brunswick would have been province number 3. Province number 4 was Saskatchewan, so the Queen City Marathon. And that was the first time that we'd flown somewhere specifically for this challenge. Province number 5 would have been Newfoundland. So that was the first one we traveled to with a kid. So that kind of injected some urgency in the mission to finish the Cross Canada Tour, because until my son turned 2, he was free to fly. So he ticked off Newfoundland while he was 1, and then we went to Manitoba just before he was 2. 2021 was province number 7, so that was PEI. Number 8 would have been Quebec. This year ticked off Calgary, so for Alberta, number 9 in the spring, and just a couple days ago went to Toronto for the big finale. So it's taken a long time, but it's always been there. I always intended to finish it eventually. I didn't really have a time frame set for it, so the fact that it's taken us across the country for 2 decades, I don't think is a bad thing. I think it's just made us appreciate it more, really.
Hurricane Otis is making its way across Mexico after slamming into the Acapulco area. It made landfall overnight as a Category 5 storm, the strongest ever to do so on the Pacific side of Mexico. The CBC's Shayna Luck has more on the impact of a monstrous storm.
Hurricane Otis slammed into the resort city of Acapulco, Mexico, bringing what forecasters called a nightmare scenario. The Category 5 storm packed life-threatening winds of around 260 kilometers per hour. Torrential rain triggered a landslide, closing the main highway, as videos emerged of flooding inside resorts. The storm hitting just before the busy winter season. As it came ashore, authorities warned people to take shelter. Many had been preparing for days. I am ready, said this woman, adding she has enough water, candles, and lights to survive. Otis went from a tropical storm to a full Category 5 hurricane in less than 24 hours. The U.S. Hurricane Center called it explosive intensification. The last time this happened was Hurricane Patricia in 2015. It caused landslides, washed out roads, and cut power and communication lines in Mexico. This scientist studies intensifying storms.
But this is one of those that's unusually high.
Rapid intensification happens in about 5% of hurricanes, but research suggests it's getting more likely because of climate change. Mexico's president says communication lines are down. The scale of this disaster could take days to understand. Meanwhile, Canadian authorities are advising against any travel to the southwestern coast of Mexico. The Canadian consulate in Acapulco is now closed temporarily, with consular assistance moving to Mexico City. Shayna Luck, CBC News, Halifax.
We hope everyone's okay there. Darius Madavi joins us with the forecast. Now, Darius, first, before we get to BC, what's the latest with Otis?
It's difficult to say because communications are down in the area as a result of this storm. And I just want to emphasize how unusual this was, going from a tropical storm to a Category 5 hurricane in less than 12 hours. The National Hurricane Center called it in their official discussion of the forecast a nightmare situation, a nightmare scenario, and catastrophic damage expected. So they're not ones to exaggerate with their words. It's definitely a very dangerous situation. You can see here going from a tropical storm to a Category 5 in under 12 hours. The incredible rainfall, strong winds up to 250 kilometers per hour that the area saw were well out of the ordinary for the area especially, which does not typically see storms like this, although they did see Patricia, the most intense hurricane ever recorded back in 2015. This is what the models were saying. Very minimal chance of it even becoming a Category 1 hurricane, and this is what we saw instead. So over the next few weeks, expect quite a bit of discussion about just how the models were wrong and how they can be improved in the future. Now, turning to BC, I missed the going forward, but the accumulation of snow will continue in some parts of the north and the southeast over the next 48 hours. But beyond that, we're not looking at much more precipitation, especially here on the coast, not much of anything at all. But the temperatures are going to stay cold. So expect quite a chill in the air over the next few days, warming up in some places in the north temporarily. Those temperatures could come back down as we head into the weekend, but a bit of a reprieve, if you can call temperatures that are well into the negatives a reprieve, but a little bit warmer, warming up a bit as we head into the very end of October. Sunny skies tomorrow for the most part, a bit of cloud building into the south, but here in Vancouver, nothing really but sunny skies and cold lows ahead.
Okay, thanks very much, Darius.
Thanks, Dan.
The children of a Chinese immigrant have retraced the steps of their father's difficult journey to Canada. Along with old memories comes a bombshell revelation. Key to all of this was the Chinese Exclusion Act. Canada adopted that racist policy as law 100 years ago, and George Wong was among the thousands affected by it. Florence Huang breaks down that impact.
It didn't drive me crazy, but I thought about it a lot, and I just there's secrets in these letters, and nobody can read them.
It's been 15 years since these siblings have all been in the same room together, and we've just delivered some shocking information. Lily, Filler, Dorothy, and Riches grew up in Regina, the children of Chinese immigrants. Now they're in their 60s and 70s, and they've come back to learn how, despite the odds, their parents built a life here, something they were always tight-lipped about.
And I remember my mom saying, this drawer has all important papers, and it was just this drawer. So, you're curious as a kid, like, what's in here?
The siblings didn't know a lot about their dad's life before he moved to Regina. In 1913, George Hongsu Wong hopped on the Empress of Asia in Hong Kong and headed to Vancouver. He was just 17 years old. When George landed, he was slapped with a head tax. An estimated 81,000 Chinese immigrants had to pay this discriminatory fee to get into Canada. Starting at $50 in 1885, it cost $500 by the time George arrived. That's $15,000 in today's dollars.
I know the way Dad felt about China, communist China. So I think he would have done almost anything to come to Canada. And I think he probably did.
After welcoming laborers to build the Canadian Pacific Railway, the Canadian government decided it wanted to discourage further Chinese immigration. So it introduced the head tax, which wasn't repealed until July 1st, 1923. That same day, the Exclusion Act was introduced. It nearly entirely restricted Chinese immigration and prevented many Chinese people already here from obtaining Canadian citizenship.
To talk about the devastating impact of exclusion on Chinese communities and Chinese families is to think about the incredible isolation and loneliness that these communities experienced as a result of exclusion.
We couldn't find much about the first few decades George spent in Canada, but we know that by the late 1940s, he had settled in Gull Lake. It's a small community 300 kilometers west of Regina. George's son, Filler, remembers visiting the town with his dad to place a headstone at the cemetery. He'd always been curious who it was for, so we took him and his siblings to Gull Lake. Older than 63 is like your 20s or 30s. We weren't able to find the grave, but we did track down the spot where George's Cafe, United Nations, used to stand, and met with someone who knew their father. Bernard Kerwin was a regular there.
I was the only daily newspaper carrier, and so I covered the whole town, and it had about 60 or 70 customers, regular customers, and it was a daily, 6 days a week, and I had to drop one off at George's Cafe.
A book about the town describes George as an avid hockey fan who drove the local teams to games. Bernard remembers his generosity.
It was not uncommon for him to, when the teams came back to town, he would open up his cafe after hours and give a meal. It usually be bacon and eggs and toast and coffee and that kind of thing. Very outgoing. Quite a character, actually.
This is the original. I'm pretty sure that's the original.
This is the business the Wong siblings remember. Back then, it was called Modern Grocery. It was one of the businesses George opened after moving to Regina in 1954. He ran it alongside his new wife, Nellie Yu Oi. When the Exclusion Act was repealed in 1947, George was able to travel back to China to get married. The family of 7 lived upstairs. It's still a Chinese-owned business, and the current owner was kind enough to show us around.
Do you remember this?
Yeah.
I remember this like crazy. This is insane.
That's the original medicine cabinet.
Yes,
right?
the original medicine cabinet.
George and Nellie sent some of the money they earned overseas. It led to disagreements for the couple, though the kids never quite understood why.
So he was sending money to his side, and then my mom says, well, you need to send the same amount to her side. You know, even when my father passed, there were these lists of people, and I'm like, who are these people? Like, I had no idea.
George passed away in 1984 at the age of 88. 2 decades later, his wife Nellie was one of 785 Chinese Canadians who received $20,000 in compensation from the Harper government for the head tax.
Today's apology will not erase the painful memories for which these past measures are responsible. But it will allow for the healing process to begin, allow us to unshackle ourselves from the burden of the past.
Nellie continued to be haunted by her own past, something her children didn't fully understand until we translated those important papers she had stowed away in a drawer. They were addressing your mom's family. She had 3 children before she met your dad. She was widowed. And the interview questions were as if they were instructing the 2 boys, which they wanted to immigrate to Canada, how to answer interviews with somebody from immigration. The 5th Wong sibling, Pearl, wasn't able to visit Regina, but she joined us by video conference, and it didn't take her long to connect the dots. She had cared for her mom in her later years. Suddenly, Nellie's erratic behavior makes more sense.
Those are the 2 boys she was talking about, because when I had her in Calgary and she had to get hospitalized, she was looking for 2 boys and they didn't know.
It's okay, Pearl. It's okay, baby.
They were calling her from the other side to go.
We're unsure whether Nellie's sons ever made it to Saskatchewan. Among the documents are hospital services plan cards for the province from 1959 and 1960 that list the boys' names. That's the same time period they were corresponding with their mother and George. The plan was required for anybody who lived in the province for at least 3 months. But we couldn't find any other evidence of the boys in Canadian records.
I knew that she suffered so much, but now this kind of even makes it worse about how much she suffered.
Lily Cho says it's not uncommon for Chinese families in Canada to carry secrets like this.
That's part of the legacy of the Exclusion Act. I think that if you live for decades as a community with very, very stringent laws leveraged against your existence, you will retreat into forms of silence. And that will carry from one generation to another.
George and Nellie's sacrifices are not lost on their children.
And it benefited all of us, in a way. We grew up in a free country, supposedly, and we can make our own destinies, right?
I'm remembering those sacred moments with my father and having to come this far so that we can have what we have is amazing. You know, is amazing. And I hope that all these other people who also came that same road find that happiness as well.
Up next, an organization in Saskatoon is offering to help former gang members. What they're taking away after this.
There's been so much history. There's been at least a handful of deaths in this house. And it's always just been rumored that it's been haunted. Definitely more than 1 or 2 ghosts. It's been around now for 200 years.
This is the Belmont House, built in the 1820s. It's been home to many prominent New Brunswick figures, from judges to senators to journalists. And rumor has it, it's even home to a few ghosts. Do you feel like there is something here?
Sometimes, not all the times, and definitely in other places more than some. But I just you get a sense of sometimes that you're not alone. It's one of the most haunted places here. Clearly, they don't want us in. All right, shh, come on, let's take a peek. Let's go. And moving through the place, there's some chilly spots, I guess, too. And you just excuse it away. You know, it's a drafty old house. So there were some folks living upstairs before us. They've seen the phantom cat. And it just kind of appears out of nowhere. It's darker, and it'll just go around the corner, and you go to chase it or just to look, and it's missing. I don't think anyone's been up there for quite some time. This woman, this ghost face that's kind of standing in one of the upstairs windows. Now I see the lady standing there. Sometimes when you show people, they don't see it. Power of suggestion, maybe. Got this little door with all of these locks. I wonder what we're trying to hold back here. Oh! There's a really creepy little latch.
I don't know if I can
here.
do it, actually. I'm really scared.
You can do it.
Oh, I'm really scared.
I'm on the fence of how I honestly feel about all of this. You know, I do hear some murmurs sometimes when I'm in the bathroom. Sometimes the door's open, sometimes it's closed. Sometimes it sounds like it's coming from out here or in the kitchen. Looking for ghosts.
Even your photo.
But yeah, it just feels nice to just be, I mean, even just a year, right, of the 200 years that this place has been around, and I mean, we're just a blip in its memory, but before any big changes, I mean, big changes could be right around the corner for this place, and it's really cool that we kind of get to be the last ones.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell. Here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
With the changes to how Canada is able to access journalism online and on social media, we want to assure you that when you're looking for CBC News, you'll always be able to find us. Wherever you are in BC, local news, breaking stories, and the latest from around the world is at your fingertips any time of the day with the free CBC News app and online at cbcnews.ca. Download the CBC News app and stay connected wherever you are.
Leaving a gang is not easy, but it is possible. Sometimes, though, there are physical reminders of that past in the form of tattoos. Now an organization in Saskatoon is helping erase them. Here's Laura Sharpaletti.
Hi. Hi. How's it going? Good. Good. You ready for today?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, let's take a seat. Session number 3?
Yes.
Perfect.
Every time Santana Longneck Cooliner sits in this chair, she gets to see her tattoo fade away a bit more. The bandana tattoo is an unwanted reminder of her time in a gang over a decade ago.
I thought it would be cool to put it on my body, to have it to be a symbol, to be recognized, to be known that I was a part of that gang.
Eventually, Longneck Cooliner left the gang to escape the violence.
I want better for my children, and I didn't want to give them the example of that, to see their mother as a gangster or, you know, a woman to be affiliated with any type of gang members or still have involvement in that life.
Want to go over any of the aftercare instructions?
Long Neck Cooliner says getting her tattoo removed feels like getting her body back, and what could cost her thousands of dollars is being done for free by Straight Up, an organization that helps get people out of gangs and on with life.
People who in the past were scratching them off or trying to remove them in other ways because they had no other means, now can come and get it done.
Hey Devin. Hello. How's it going?
Good. Devin Napope got his tattoos in prison about 15 years ago.
You ready?
He left the gang a few years later, and yet...
I'm going in for an interview. You know, I already have to worry about my skin color, you know, and then on top of that, I got to think about the tattoos and the stigma that goes with them.
Start with a test shot.
Napope says Straight Up's tattoo removal program is giving him a fresh start.
I'm able to be me. It's a resurgence in my, who I am. So it kind of gave me the opportunity to figure out who I am and understand what I really want for myself now, instead of looking at reminders of the past.
Straight Up got the tattoo removal laser earlier this year through funds from the province's gang violence reduction strategy.
Good job.
Laura Sharpaletti, CBC News.
Perfect.
Saskatoon.
That feel.
Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as anytime on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC. Tanya Fletcher will have your next local news at 11 o'clock, right after the National. Have a good night.